I'm a quote guy, and I'm always collecting quotes, and
Me
to
too.
tie it up in a bow. Yeah, right. It's great. To tie it up in a bow is just and I'm a movie guy too. So let's do movie and a quote, and I'll sign off, and you guys can talk more if you want. But is the bucket list, with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, and there's a quote in there, and it says, "You measure yourself by the people who measure themselves by you." It's funny now because some of the things I heard back then, or some of the things that you share with others now, that confide in me, like, hey, why am I not getting a chance? Why am I not getting a break? And I just remember those conversations where, there's preparation meets a little bit of luck, a little bit of opportunity. You can go to a camp now and you can do everything right. You can have a good game. You can be a good partner. You can off the floor. You can present well as a consummate professional. But if you just have, just these blah games that don't showcase your skill set, it might be another year for you to have to wait. There was these two young college kids and they had this delicious looking pie, and all of us were hungry too because we just jetted out of the locker room. And I literally went over to those kids and I was like, they're college kids, right? We remember the dollars goes a little farther. I literally was like, guys, I'll give you $50 for that pizza right now. And they were like, what? Of course, now $50 is barely buy you a pizza, right? And those guys were like, absolutely. So give them $50, and here we are, our little group walking back, just eating that pizza. And I can tell you the memory I have, that was probably the best tasting pizza I've ever eaten in my life. So my point is that, you know what, we sometimes get caught up in these games so much in this and that, but it's that relationships, it's the people, it's, that's what you asked me, what I remember from my first NCAA tournament. That's what I remember, and I'll never forget.
And now, episode 11, Letter J, Journey. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Kyle Bacon on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, back with my co-host Nate Acosta. We are making our way through the officiating alphabet, with this being the 10th letter we're covering.
On this episode, we are covering the letter J, and our special guest will be talking with us about the officiating journey and the importance of the different phases of that journey.
We would like to welcome NCAA Division I women's basketball referee Kyle Bacon to From A to Zebra. Kyle, thank you so much for being here with us, especially as your season is underway and you're joining us on the road, actually. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Not only NCAA women's official, Final Four official. He is a Final Four official. Can't forget to leave that out.
Spoiler alert, we get to that later in the podcast, but it's all right. You can lead with that. It's okay.
Absolutely. But go ahead and tell us, Kyle, about your journey. Tell us why you started officiating and how you got to where you are.
Journey, yeah, it's quite a journey. Been officiating now for a little over 30 years, actually. When I was a freshman in college, that's kind of how I got started. I was an athlete all through high school, multiple sports, football, basketball, baseball. And then when I was a freshman in college, I just happened to be walking through the dorm there and saw an individual and had his gear on and was headed off to a game. And I just said, hey, gosh, what are you doing? And he told me, oh, I'm going to referee some basketball games and stuff. And just a simple, how do I get involved with that? And he said, there's a local association here, and you go there, you take a true false test, like 100 true false open book test, and just kind of ran with it. And I think over those first several years, I was living in Montana, and gosh, I had a journal. When I recently moved and found this old journal, and I chronicled all my games, and there was a couple early seasons where I did like 300 or 400 games, but I mean, you would do men's league and you would do, 6, 7, 8 games a day. And so it was just, those early years was just about just reps. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. So that was the beginning of the journey. And I, refereed starting out in the early 90s. And to your point, I think I just did it to keep involved in and around sports. And let's be honest, a little extra spending money, a little beer money in college. And, it honestly put me through college because with those number of games, even at the minimal pay, it was a great side gig. I did that for every year all through college. So yeah, that was the inception of the journey.
How many classes did you skip to go officiate a game?
I don't know if I skipped any, but I'm sure I had to cut out early a few times, a year in the trunk of the car and hustling through the parking lot. And so it was, and, Montana being the way it is, the schools are spread out and a lot of them are rural. And man, the amount of mileage in those early years was
Gosh.
just, it was a lot. So yeah, got to see a very beautiful state.
So you were a have game will travel kind of guy. It sounds like 300
Oh,
games in the first
jeez,
couple of years.
man. Yeah, I did not say no very often. So but it was a great start. I will say that.
I just recently was talking to a director of officials in one of our state associations, and he said he still actively officiates, and he said he has the best kind of ability, and that's availability. So sometimes that's
Yeah,
sometimes that's the magic key. I was like, I like that. So
yeah,
sounds like you
absolutely.
were.
Yeah.
So kind of talking about the nexus of your journey, when you were in your first few years of officiating, what were some of your personal goals as a referee? And did you have kind of a specific timeline for hitting those goals as you were getting started?
Well, starting in 1992, I don't know if I really had any specific career-oriented goals with officiating. Like I said, I was just doing it for a side gig, for money, stay in shape. Got to meet some really great, influential people early in my career. And so I don't think it really started to become like aspirations for as far as Division One and some of those things until probably 5 or 6 years in, and I started going to my first, summer camps, training camps, probably in the late 90s. And, that D1 carrot started to kind of be dangled out there. And so then I would say from the late 90s and the early 2000s, man, I was going to a lot of camps. And when I say a lot, those summers would consist of, 5 to 8 camps, and, was just grinding. And I think in 2000, I moved from Montana to Arizona. And I think that's when it really became kind of this short-term goal. And that was to make a Division One roster. And it also, I think it kind of coincided with some frustration. I felt like, gosh, I'm spending all this time, money, effort in my summer times to, crack into Division One. And it just didn't feel like it was kind of going to happen. So I remember in the early 2000s, I set this timeline. I said, if I don't reach Division One by the time I'm 30, I wasn't going to quit officiating. I just was going to, kind of redirect some of those time, money, effort and towards something else. And because at that point, being 30, I started officiating when I was 18. So 12 years which is, I'm sure people chuckle now because the rate in which some individuals jump to Division One now is just exponential compared to my journey. But with that being said, too, there's just a lot more educational, informative situations that were in Arizona, being a larger metro area. That was all part of the journey. I think it was meant to happen when it was supposed to happen. But yeah, 30 years old was my cutoff. And that summer, I guess it was kind of fortuitous. Marla Denham, the former supervisor of the Big Sky Conference, approached me at camp, and after probably my fourth or fifth try, and approached me, and the opportunity came along. So it was fortunate.
What were some of the conversations that were happening? I mean, you go on a camp 4 or 5 times. Marla would have had to have said something to you like, Kyle, you're just not ready. You're lacking these skills. What were you being told at camp that, you just weren't getting in?
It's funny now because some of the things I heard back then or some of the things that you share with others now that confide in me, like, hey, why am I not getting a chance? Why am I not getting a break? And I just remember those conversations where, there's preparation meets a little bit of luck, a little bit of opportunity. You can go to a camp now and you can do everything right. You can have a good game. You can be a good partner. You can off the floor. You can present well as a consummate professional. But if you just have, just these blah games that don't showcase your skill set, it might be another year for you to have to wait. And so as far as Marla telling me, I think that's part of what it was. It was just like, you got to be ready to step up and this and that. And I will say, I'll share with the group. I think I was pressing. I was just like, oh, I want to achieve this so bad. I want to achieve this so bad. And was pressing so hard in some of these summer camps that was making some mistakes and this and that. And I remember the summer of before I got hired in Division I believe it was 2002. I just said, I'm just going to go into it with no expectations, just relax, just let it rip. And that was the summer where it just, and I also had gone to, at the time, it was the Pac-10 conference, and I had zero expectations. You don't go from not working Division I to getting hired in, at the time, it wasn't called a power conference, but it was the Pac-10. But I just went there to get some exposure and learn some stuff from some of the best. And so going in with that expectation at zero, like, I'm not going to get hired in the Pac-10, I just had an amazing camp. I had some situations dealt with properly. And at the time, Gooch Foster, who was the supervisor then, approached me and said, hey, what are you working now? Man, you do a really nice job. And I was like, oh, I work in the junior college leagues in Arizona. And she was just kind of shocked and surprised. She's like, well, you're not working Division I? And I was like, no. And she's like, wow, I'd love to give you an opportunity, but the Pac-10 is not where you want to start your Division I career. Now, all of us, the competitor, us hear that, we're like, oh, come on, give me a shot, I'm ready.
I could do it.
Yeah, I can do it. And she's like, nah, it's not the right spot to start this endeavor. But at minimum, what I am going to do is I'm going to reach out to a few folks and see if we can get you an opportunity. And, so I can only speculate. She had a conversation with Marla, and, that's what kind of was that little break I needed to get a shot. Cheers. Yeah.
And Kyle, I think from
Yeah, Kyle.
from that perspective, I think it's one of the things about officials that I always appreciate is the fact that you're agile, and you do have to understand how to pivot your expectations almost of yourself. We had an official back home who I knew he could work, and I'd see him on the court, and you could just see him thinking to where he was overanalyzing everything so much. And I finally told him once, I said, you need to stop thinking. And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you're over analyzing every play. Just go officiate. Yeah. And he actually listened, and he just went out and worked, and it was so much better. And he told me, he goes, that's the first time I felt like I wasn't under pressure. And I was like, it's because you just let yourself get into the natural flow of the game, and you called fouls when you saw them, you called violations when you saw them. And it was just so much, it was immediate in the way it reflected in that next game. And I think the fact that you had to shift your mindset from that pressing so hard to just like, hey, I'm going to go do the best I can, and whatever ends up happening, ends up happening. And that ended up being, in your journey, it sounds like that was kind of a turning point for you and really the catalyst to the start of your collegiate Division I officiating career. So I love that you shared that story, because I think people need to understand the element of patience, but also the element of being able to change the way you see things and the way you're approaching camp and the way you're approaching your games. So that's a great, we're always getting nuggets on this podcast. That's a solid gold nugget right there.
And I can't say it enough. I think that, that camp journey is the same as your game count journey. I think a lot of times we come in and, man, give me a chance and give me 20 games and I'm going to be great, and it just takes one game for you to really screw up that you're not ready for, and it will set you back. And so, I think that you do have to be patient. You have to just kind of go out and get the games that you get, work what you get, and enjoy the journey in that process, because eventually you're going to get your games and you're going to get that opportunity. But until then, really soak in and learn from the games that you have, because, man, all it takes is one game that you're not ready for, and it's all gone. And, especially at this level. And so for you high school officials out there, it's the same thing, you know? I mean, take every opportunity to just enjoy the journey, because all it takes is one situation that just ruins it for you. And so I think you're absolutely spot on. But, speaking of journey, every journey comes with some kind of adversity, some kind of setback. Name a time that you at one point in your career you just felt like, man, this is like detrimental. This is going to set me back. And how did you overcome that?
Okay. And you just said something, and I want to piggyback on that before we kind of jump to your question is
Yeah.
that, you talk about this patience and you talk about this kind of gradual kind of succession of your career, whether at any level. And here's the beauty in that story is that I remember, so I got hired in the Big Sky Conference, and there was another mid-major the following year that I got hired. And I worked those 2 years, and I've got a limited number of games. But the beauty in the hindsight being 2020 is I remember 2 years later, I actually did get an opportunity. I got hired in the Pac-10. And I remember that day I walked out my first Pac-10 game. I was at the University of California, and I walked out, and I just remember the confidence and that I was just at peace. I mean, this is the Pac-10. It's the pinnacle of officiating out on the West Coast. And I walked out and I was just so calm. I just felt prepared. I felt ready. I felt like, okay, this is when this moment was supposed to happen. There were certain things. There was like timing packs that, didn't work in those lower levels and this and that. And I thought to myself, it wasn't until then that I thought, man, that's why I didn't get this opportunity 2 years ago, because I felt like it would have been rushed. And to your point, Nate, and people have to understand that if I would have screwed that up, it's an uphill climb after that. You have this damage that can't be undone so quickly versus you have this, I guess, career capital in your bank where, if you have a little bit of a screw up in this and that, you're okay. You've got a body of work that you can rest on. If I would have went into the Pac-10 that first year, been kind of so, I just don't know because after I got into the Pac-10, then the success came fairly quickly. But I think it was because that foundation was so solidified, before those opportunities came. So I'm sorry to not kind of segue away from your
awesome.
question.
No,
That's
absolutely.
awesome.
But it was like you set it up perfectly for me. And that was the caveat of that situation is it was after the fact, I look back and go, you know what? That was supposed to happen exactly the way it did. And so that, now I look back and I'm like, man, I was so grateful for that happening. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
To your question, setbacks. There was just the initial frustration, I think, of like, grinding out camps for 11, 12 years. That was some frustration too. But I really, really would have to say the biggest frustration or disappointment or challenge would have been probably like everybody else, COVID year. And let me give you a little bit of kind of context. I believe it was Super Bowl Sunday of that couple months before COVID hit, was playing some flag football with some friends in the neighborhood. And man, I really injured my heel. And I kind of pushed it and pretty hard the next few weeks and was dealing with this bad heel injury and grinded out, did the games. Well, we got to March and I managed it and we got to March and I was working a conference tournament game and about 70 seconds to go in the game, I just popped my plantar fascia. I think that wear and tear just caught up with me and not healing properly. So I popped the plantar fascia. Well, unbeknownst 2 days later, the world pretty much shut down. COVID shut down, no NCAA tournament. Couldn't really get in to see a doctor because we were all in that, unknown phase of COVID. So I kind of, through phone calls and a friend of a friend got in touch with a podiatrist. He treated me, sent me a boot, did this and that, treated it. So I finally recovered from the plantar fasciitis tear. And then it was in July or August of COVID year. And don't fault me for this, but back to playing a little bit of flag football. I think I would learn.
The
and a
competitor never
complete,
dies.
geez, man. Yeah, I was working for a friend, and he had some group homes with some youth that, and I was out there having some fun, and non-contact, jumped in the air to block a pass, came down, and completely blew out my knee. So that was the first and pretty much serious injury, knock on wood, that I've had in this whole endeavor. And so, yeah, to bounce back from that amidst the COVID chaos, and it was all of that, and then a little levity, even more so. I think it was like about a month later, my wife broke her foot. And so we live in a 2-story house, so it was a little bit of rock, paper, scissors, who was going up and down the stairs. But yeah, it just, I hear now all my colleagues, and Nate was part of that, people talking about all the testing chaos and going to schools, and I missed all that. Even in the darkness, I found the light that, I missed probably one of the most hellacious, unfun seasons. And everybody talks about COVID and how awful it was. And I sat home for an entire year during that. And man, the amount of time that I put in the family bank, it was really good, And then I also learned that too, is that you really find out when you step away from this, who your close friends are and who really, really are your confidants. And because, man, that train keeps moving. And there was a few individuals that really kept up and checked on me every week or two. And that was a very tough time, and worked my ass off to get back with physical therapy. And you go through some of that physical therapy, and you just question yourself, will I ever get back to where it was, And, you really, that self-doubt. And, I've been doing this for a while now. So to suffer a serious injury like that was, yeah, it sucked.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard us, us well, Kyle. You've heard us talk about officiating family, and as you're talking about going through that darkness, those people that were there for you in your officiating family outside of your actual blood related family. And
Mhm.
I remember when you were going through all of that, and it's so weird because obviously we want you to just be okay physically, but we also want you to be back in the game that you love. It's always, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, what does that do for his career? Like, that's just a knee jerk. It's like when you see an athlete get injured and you're like, gosh, is he going to be back to play? It's kind of that same feeling. And it's, there's a human side of just wanting somebody to be okay, but then there's that other thing of, is this the end of their career? And that's always such a dark and daunting thing to think about. But your mind goes down that road for sure. I remember when your injury happened, and it was at such a weird time during COVID because everything was weird then. And I can't
Yeah.
imagine just the day to day of having to process that and go through it. So I appreciate you sharing that different perspective about COVID time as an official, because I've
Yeah.
definitely heard Nate talk about, getting tested every time, all the time, and, just the rigors of that. So what a weird experience.
And I'll tell you one piece of that if you're one of those individuals that rely on officiating for a decent portion or all of your income, it cannot stress enough to you having some things in place financially, like security wise, like a disability policy or something. Because fortunately, I had a disability policy in place, and it is so important. Even if you rely on this as a side income and this and that, you got to protect that. You really do.
That's love that you brought that up, because those are things we talk a lot about, things that people don't know when they get into officiating.
Mhm.
No one tells them stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, I
make sure
mean,
that you protect the fact that this is a part of your income or all of your income, insurance and disability protection and all of that. I love that you brought that up, because we don't talk about, you're signing up to be an official. Here's what your tax liability is going to be. Like, those are just not things we talk about that we
yeah,
1000% should. So
absolutely.
thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely, because for me, I mean, I've been chasing this dream of being, not only a Division I official, but you also have to think about the careers that you choose, and obviously, you're not gonna. This isn't the end all be all. So you got to find a job that's going to be flexible with your
Yeah,
officiating schedule, and
goodness.
because Dana said at the beginning of this, availability is important, and if you're not available, you know, that's your game count is not going to be great, and your reps aren't going to be great. And so, you know, I'm not saying go chase your careers do what you got to do to put food on the table. But if you're seriously thinking about doing this at a high level, you really got to start thinking about careers that are going to be flexible for the as well.
For
Mhm.
sure.
Absolutely.
So, Kyle, you've worked over a dozen NCAA Division I women's basketball tournaments during your journey. Can you tell us kind of about the first time you were selected to the tournament, that feeling you got when you got the call, and what that experience felt like walking onto the floor for the first time as a tournament referee?
And my answer to this is it kind of lends to a broader point. I remember getting the email being selected, and it's such an accolade to be included in that postseason, the dance and this and that. And I do remember the email, but I can't tell you celebratory wise or this or that. Can't tell you the teams I refereed. I can tell you where I was. I was fortunate enough to go to Austin, Texas for my very first NCAA tournament. And it was St. Patty's Day. So if any of you been to Austin and you down there near the university and
Kind
what
of
is
a
it?
party.
Was Sixth Street? Yeah, it's and I do remember this too. This was back when the NCAA tournament had these super sites where they had 8 teams. So there's 4 games that first day versus now it's pretty much just 2 games. So with 4 games, there's 12 plus officials there with alternate and this and that. And so I was in Austin and I drew the short straw and got the very last game of the night. And I do remember my partners but I remember we tipped off at like 10 p.m. ish and this and that. And I couldn't tell you anything about the game. Walking out on the floor, I remember thinking, wow, Texas, this is, everything bigger and brighter in Texas. And so I do remember that. And I remember I was on the game with one of my very good friends, Chuck Gonzalez. So I do remember that. But here's what I do remember the most. No, nothing went on in the game. It was cool. It was great to be a part. And here's what I remember. And this is what all of us, I think, do remember after our officiating days are done is the people that I was hanging out with afterwards. We left that arena very late. It was probably midnight now or after midnight. We hustled and hustled. We got down to 6th Street. And I remember I was with Chuck. And I also remember that I was with probably one of my dearest close friends, Penny Davis, who's the national coordinator now and who's now her wife. They weren't married at the time, but I remember us and the group that we were with, and we just kind of went and had some fun down in Austin. And we burnt a little midnight oil and 2, 3 in the morning, kind of finding our way back to the hotel. It's one of those indelible moments. Like there was the street truck there, and they, all the college kids were, it's 2, 3 in the morning, and everybody's hungry and famished and this and that. And I never forget, we were walking back. And there was these 2 young college kids, and they had this delicious looking pie. And all of us were hungry too, because we just jetted out of the locker room. And I literally went over to those kids and I was like, they're college kids, right? We remember the dollars goes a little farther. I literally was like, guys, I'll give you $50 for that pizza right now. And they were like, what? Of course, now $50 is barely buy you a pizza, right? And those guys were like, absolutely. So give them $50. And here we are, our little group walking back, just eating that pizza. And I can tell you the memory I have, that was probably the best tasting pizza I've ever eaten in my life. So my point is that, you know what, we sometimes get caught up in these games so much in this and that, but it's that relationships, it's the people, it's, that's what you asked me what I remember from my first NCAA tournament. That's what I remember, and I'll never forget some of those things, and so it's the people in this business, the social currency and the memories and just some ride or die friends that you meet. Yeah, that's what I remember.
I love that. Oh my gosh, the pizza, buying a pizza off of a college kid on the
Oh
street. That's
man.
fantastic. We've all been that hungry before where it's like, that looks amazing.
And we had a few beverages. If I'm being, I'll keep it PG, but we had a few beverages.
But you had to have that pizza right now.
Well, and it's about the beer after the game. I mean, that's what this is all about. And if you're not enjoying your crew after a game, then you're doing this thing the wrong way, because it's I mean, yeah, the games are fun, absolutely, but I can tell you this is not why I do it. I do it for the games, but I really do it for the beer after the game with the crew.
bars and cars. And you know what, that's not just lip service. That was in 2007, my first NCAA. And just here this past March, I was in Spokane, the first and second rounds. And, Nate being a flight attendant, I was like, get your butt over here. And sure enough, he did. He showed up in Spokane with a couple of one of my good buddies I started out with in Montana years ago, and a few other friends. And 20 years from now, will I remember the game at Spokane? No, but I'll remember hanging out with Nate afterwards. And we always say bars and cars. It's those relationships that they make the marks that won't go away.
Nate did, when he went, he texted me pictures that he was there, and I was so
Yeah.
jealous because we do, I think, in this family that we have, we kind of suffer FOMO a little bit. We're like, oh, you got to be there and I didn't. Like, well, give him a hug for me, tell him I said hi. But I was like, oh, that's so cool that you went. And I'll praise Nate here. That's what Nate does. Like, he's going to be that guy cheering for everybody else who's officiating and proud of their accomplishments. So it was cool.
Well, and
I
didn't even care. Honestly, I didn't even care that Kyle's working the game. I just wanted to have the beer with him after the game.
Well, I figured that was fun. I knew that. You just happened to send me the picture while you were at the game. So
yeah. And
that was my point of reference.
To your point, Dana, I could tell you probably more details when we were at the NASO convention in Spokane. I don't know that was pre-COVID. I could tell you probably more details about that than some of the basketball games. That's what I mean. That's what. And here's the sad part. Is I think that's being lost a little and little, more and more, and I wish we could really continue to kind of cultivate that and this and that, and that's one thing that younger officials have to understand is that, man, these relationships are the sacred part of this business.
I agree. And, Nate and I, that was something that we were always trying to do back in New Mexico when we were working together. And I think that was part of why we started this podcast, is really to focus on the importance of the relationships and the friendships. And, everybody that we've had on this podcast are friends of ours and people in our officiating family, because we understand that all of you are like-minded and you understand that it's bigger than the game. Yes, the game is awesome and there's rewards that come with it, and officiating is fun and it's good to give back to sports that you love and all of that. But all of us rely so heavily on the people that are in our circle for life stuff. It's not about officiating. It's about the people that are there for you when all the chips are on the table and you really need somebody to have your back. And I think that mentorship element and the fact that officials don't travel to games in the car together anymore and all of that as you two were coming up at officiating, that was part of it. You all hopped in the car, you traveled to the site together, and you had those conversations and the laughter and the picking on each other and all the things that officials do. And that is being lost. And I don't know how to regrow that, but I hope that people hearing that message understand that it's bigger than the X's and O's of officiating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very much so.
And thank you, Kyle, because I don't think that there are enough just quote unquote big time officials out there that are willing to just, he opened the door for me to go to the Pac-12 tournament and watch him. Then the following week, get to come to Spokane and watch him. And then the following week, I went to Portland and got to watch him, and obviously I was able to do that because of my flight benefits and my job allowing me to do that. But you know what? Like, man, he didn't have to open the door. He didn't have to just say, you know what? Yeah, come on, or hey, come join. It's not that it's expected, but it's welcomed, and so thank you for that. I think, if you're listening, go find yourself a Kyle Bacon that's gonna open the door, because trust me, in those 3 weeks, I learned more in those 3 weeks just listening to, post game, in the bar or the hotel room, in the car, than I did all season long working my games. And so find yourself those opportunities to be able to be a part of that. And because you don't know until you know, and if you've never experienced, everybody talks about wanting to be a NCAA tournament official. You've never even been to one. You've never watched one. How are you supposed to go officiate that tournament if you've never even watched one? And so those were huge moments, definitely coming into this coming season, that I'll take back. And so thank you. But,
I love that you said that, Nate. That's a huge point with Kyle, because when I was still in New Mexico, Kyle came to town to work a Lobo game, and we met for lunch at Hello Deli and just sat and talked about life. And it was really one of the first times Kyle and I probably got to just sit and talk about not just officiating, but about everything. And I think I learned so much about Kyle as an official by learning about Kyle as a human being, and talking about the Spokane NASO summit and sitting at the rooftop little situation at the hotel. And there was a whole group
that
of
was a good
us.
time.
And those are the moments. Like, Kyle, I have notes from camps that you spoke at and the forum when you were on the staff. And I have all of those notes somewhere, but I don't need notes for just the personal interaction that we've had and the fun that we've had and the laughter and the good times that have helped me just as much in my career as the meat and potatoes of the stuff that you teach. So I think that Nate's point and your point, such a good thing for especially newer officials to hear, but also older veteran officials who have forgotten that and have forgotten those roots and have forgotten those relationships and just cutting up with people and having a good time, because you have to, because officiating isn't easy. So you have to find the solace in those friendships and relationships and that support. So I love that you both brought that up, because it is absolutely spot on.
So Kyle, I think that every college basketball official, men's or women's, their goal is to work a Final Four. You got to do that, which is, a crowning achievement for all of us basketball officials. Walk us through that experience. Maybe that season, a couple games before. What was it? I mean, walk us through that experience. How did it feel? And what was that, what was that like as part of your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you one thing I think was part of that journey in that particular season. It was 2016. Is that I know one thing that made me a better official was 3 years prior to that when I became a father. My wife and I adopted a newborn in 2013, our daughter Lucy, and then that actual season, 2016, the Final Four season, my son Remy, who we adopted as at birth as well, her biological brother, he was born in 2016. That is such a huge piece, because you realize that there's some other things that basketball isn't the center of the universe, and I remember the kind of it's really interesting, because people are all like, what'd you do when you got the phone call, and this and that. And I received the phone call from June Corto, and I remember, I kid you not, I couldn't make it up. I literally had my son on the couch, changing a nasty, dirty diaper when the phone rings, and it's that day that you be told, hey, watch your phone and this and that. So you can't like, oh, I'll answer that one later. I literally was like, I got the phone and I got my son Remy, and it's just like, and then after you get off the phone, there's it's just a culmination, I guess, of just a lot of hard work over the years, and a lot of contributions by a lot of people. Some of my first early mentors in Montana, all the way through to the early Division I years, and current mentors, and just, it is literally a celebration, like I said, of a lot of influence by some really good people. And leading up to that, it's preparation, it's hard work, and the biggest piece, and especially this is the part where I like to impart, is opportunity. I had a couple early good first, second round games, and then the way it works is you work a regional, whether it's Sweet 16 or Elite 8. I had an Elite 8 game where a particular coach had a moment where they egregiously did something, and I just handled it. And this is the part I tell everybody. I have a lot of confidence that, Nate, if you were on that game, or some of our other mutual colleagues, they would have handled it the same way. So, and that probably would have been you or them that went to the Final Four, but it was the opportunity I had, and I was fortunate enough to have it, and I dealt with it. And so it was that allowed, I guess, propelled me to get the opportunity for the Final Four. And then, so yeah, it was great. It just does. It feels like you put the cherry on the sundae of a career. I think the beauty of it in it for me was, I remembered specifically the national anthem before the game during the Final Four. And I just remember to literally sit there and tell myself, cherish this moment, cherish it, because you might easily never come back, because so it was just like I really savored it. I had some family there at the game. It was in Indianapolis, and, it was just great. And another piece of that, too, is that I remember before the game in the locker room, I had this purple bracelet. It was in memoriam of Greg Willard. Some of you know he was a former NBA referee, and I remember, I think it was the year prior to that, I was at a regional NCAA tournament game, and I was walking back from dinner with a very, very, very close friend, and we had just heard that Greg passed away. And you kind of heard some of his story as well about he was working the Western Conference Finals or whatever, and they called him in his hotel room, and he said, "Hey, you got to come home right away." And that for me was like, this shit can be over with quick. So, you embrace those moments. Cause like I said, to get a phone call saying, "Hey, you got to come home and start treatment right away." You know, I mean, wow, it just puts it into perspective.
Well, I
So,
think that I think the coolest part that I took away from that was that you guys adopted Remy in the same year, and it's almost completion of your family. It's something that you wanted. You wanted to have this family. You and Jeannie had this goal of having a family, and you finally
yeah.
complete your family. You also have this goal of being a Final Four official, and you meet that goal all in the same year. And not too many people have a story like that and get to, say that they accomplished two huge things in the same year.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched upon my wife Jeannie as like such an instrumental part because those seasons are long. And she'll tell you now here, 8 years later, she's like, "Really, when you got the phone call to the Final Four, it was a blur." She's like, "I don't even know if I really celebrated it because I was in the trenches of a newborn, and my son had some health issues because there was some issues he had at birth and this and that." So she's like, that was a blur. Final Four, woo, great, back at it. So
Cool. I got stuff to do.
yeah, no, and like, because she didn't attend, and now looking back, she's like really sad that she didn't share in that moment. But it's easy to see why,
For
because
sure.
stayed in the trenches of having a 3-year-old and a newborn that was having some health issues, and it was just, yeah, I mean, so it's these accolades and stuff. They're badass, they're cool, but you have to have some perspective and some relevance. It's so.
That's
And
that's a great point. I don't know what year it was, but it was at Marla Denham's camp one year. Kip Luna, who I think everybody on this would know, Kip was there, and he had been, for those who don't know, Kip was involved in a very serious car accident and was wheelchair bound, came back as an assigner in New Mexico for a number of years to give back because he obviously couldn't officiate anymore. And Marla had him as a speaker at her camp one year. And I remember sitting in the room when he was speaking, and he was talking about, you don't know when is going to be your last game. And everybody was, it was just tears everywhere because you don't think about, like you were talking about with Greg Willard, you're not expecting to get a call of you have to come home and start treatment. You don't think you're going to get an accident where you aren't going to be able to officiate anymore. And that speech just resonated with everyone because we take it for granted. We take for granted everything that we do every day, and then not being able to do the things that you love, or not being able to walk, or not being able to live and survive. You don't think about it. So I love that you talked about that national anthem and reminding yourself to cherish it, because we don't know. And I don't want this to be a depressing podcast, but it's just it's just the reality of it. And I always think of Kip's story and that speech and the reaction of everybody in the room, and seeing everybody just have that moment of like, damn, like I need to embrace this, good, bad, or ugly. I've just got to make sure that I'm making sure that I'm in the moment when I'm officiating and I'm taking it in, because you don't know when you can't do it anymore. So, you talked a little bit, and this may be repetitive, but I'm going to ask anyway. So outside of, tournament selection and any other accolades that you've received, What are some of the biggest rewards that you've really gotten out of your journey as a basketball referee?
Yeah, I think we touched upon it in different ways. Just the relationships, man. Just from absolutely, and you two are on this call. Just some relationships with some amazing individuals, like lifelong friends. If I decided, if I had a moment tomorrow where my career was over and I still have a handful of, multiple hands probably of some people that are going to be friends for life, and we can share in some laughter and some good times regardless of basketball. And that honestly is for me the biggest takeaway. It's just the relationships, just some amazing people that inspire me and still empower me to still want to still get better, and not just on the basketball floor, but as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as just a work associate. Just being surrounded by some really good people, good quality people. I think back to the NASO, and I think we have collaborated, and you shared some new friends with me and vice versa.
I
And,
did.
I think we had some correspondence, went back and forth. Terry Gregson comes to mind of just, man, what has gravitated towards that. And so it's, like I said, is just, yes, the amazing people. The journey along the way, just, I've been to some pretty damn cool places doing this gig that I never, if you took a young kid in Montana and told him that this job would take me here or take me there or experience this or do that, I would have been like, yeah, you're crazy. But no, it really does. And now the fruits of those associations, and like my son is enjoying some of that, and my daughter a little bit. She's not a sports person, but going to games now and some of the professional contests and knowing the referees and knowing some people and knowing some athletes. Sabrina Ionescu sent him a pair of basketball shoes here
Wow.
a few months ago. So he thought he was the cat's meow, and he's like, oh, Dad, how do you know? It's like, so it's just, yes, this gig is pretty awesome. So
It's cool.
yeah.
So, Kyle, for someone who is starting their officiating journey, what's some advice you have for them?
Man, how much time you got?
As much as you want to give.
Yeah, no, I mean, we touched upon some of it already, but I think, we kind of chatted about this briefly, and I had a couple things that really come to mind. I think that, and we just talked about it. I said, the spirit of our times right now and everything is this joyless urgency. We just, everything right now and just, on to the next thing. And it's this utter joyless urgency. And I think we said it, stop and smell the roses. Like, and I've done that a little, but I wish I would have done a little bit more, because here I am 30 years in, and I'm on the downslope of this career rather than the upslope. And if you don't think it happens fast, I got news for you. It blinks, and same thing with my kids. They're 11 and 8 now, and it just seems like, yeah, Remy was on the couch and I was getting the call, and it goes so fast. And so, man, stop and cherish and enjoy some of this stuff, because it is really amazing, but it goes fast. Another thing, be impeccable with your word. It's going to be the currency of your career. Be somebody that walks the walk, talks the talk, and champion one another, empower one another. Don't don't be a character arsonist or a verbal arsonist. There's enough of that. And I'll be transparent and candid. There's times in my career I've done a little bit of that. But where I'm at now, it's just like I'm trying to make a choice each and every day to just champion one another. And if you don't have something, it's like the things you learn in kindergarten. If you don't have something nice to say about somebody, then don't say anything at all. Another thing is, we talked about early in the call about the process, the journey, everything happening at its pace, at its intended kind of the way it's supposed to go. And I say, there's a quote I saw. It's like, the difference between a master and a beginner? The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. You know, you get young officials now, they get a little taste of success. And I bet you I was guilty of it a little bit earlier on when I first couple years in Division One. And you'd be working with that crafty old veteran who couldn't get up and down the floor very fast anymore, or whatever, and this and that. And so I think I underestimated it a little bit. I didn't completely disregard it, but man, those people are masters for a reason. Like, we all look like $1,000,000 at 25, 28 years old, run the floors like gazelle and this and that. But there is such value in a commodity to experience, and whether it's the way they talk to a coach or whether they've seen a situation that you never even dreamt of, or it's just, don't forget, they have that experience. And like us, they've probably kicked some shit. I've kicked my shit. And I know that's what I've learned the most from, is when I screw stuff up. And now when I see people screw up, I don't try and, kind of get that intel as a like hate on them. It's like, I'd rather somebody else screw it up. I internalize that information so I don't do it. So that would be something, is just realize that, man, never disrespect experience. Take care of your home life. As somebody that's had challenges with kids and, being gone as much as I am, and my wife being a trooper, because, man, you have to have a supportive partner, spouse. It doesn't matter even if you're at the Division I level, junior college, high school, it takes you away from home a lot. So put the time in when you can. I'm excited. Back in your neck of the woods this coming weekend, I'll be in New Mexico, and I think my son is going to go on that road trip with me, get on the flight and come to the pit. And, so I want him to start to experience it, but also expose him to the fact that it's not all nice dinners and this and that. And, oh, you get to go on an airplane, peace and quiet. No, it's a job. It's hard. It's a grind. It's no sleep. It's bad weather. It's stuff changing. It's, but I think if home life is solidified, you'll be that much better at this gig and at any level. Take care of your body. I remember when officials used to tell me early in my career, take care of your knees, ice your knees. I tell people all the time, if you start to do this for a significant amount of money, invest in the modalities, invest in a personal trainer that trains you specifically, eat right, keep that weight off. Literally, your body is your vessel to perform this job, and you got to put some investment into it because it's so, so important. Last, I think, is the longer you do this, it kind of shifts from, don't be so focused on success, be more kind of have the crosshairs on significance, and significance being pay it forward. I spent time with Nate, and Nate's going to spend time with officials that are coming behind him, and also significance, and just leave a lasting thing on this game, because the games are going to go on long after I'm gone. But I sure hope that people will be like, man, that road trip I went on with Kyle, or the way he treated that person, or, just want to leave this endeavor in a better place than when you find it, I guess is what I'm saying. And there's a lot that goes to that. But, if you kind of have a mindset of from success to significance, I think that can be achieved. So that was a little long-winded, but those are 5 or 6 bullet points that I would say I would tell younger officials, and hopefully that, they want to take that for what it's worth.
That was brilliant. So you actually just wow, that knocked my socks off. But we do have this mission every week on From A to Zebra to educate, elevate, and excite. And you just did that. I was going to ask a follow-up question, but that last statement did all of that, because you just hit the nail on the head in every level. And that last portion, I'm just going to replay it over and over again, because that was, wow. That was good stuff. I've been speechless like a couple times on this podcast, and you just got me there. So I appreciate you doing that. But that was educate, elevate, and excite, because everything you said was exactly what listeners need to hear, whether they're going to be an official, whether they are an official, or whether they're just a fan of sports and they're trying to learn more about officiating. You just encompassed all of that in your last answer. So it really wasn't a long answer. It was just answering 2 questions, and you didn't even know you were doing that. So thank you for that. And thank you, Kyle, for the things I've always appreciated about you is your humility. And I appreciate how humble you are. And you've done this for, I still can't believe you said 30 years, because you're only 39. So that's that's really fantastic. But I appreciate that humility, and I appreciate you always taking the time to pay it forward, because you've done that. You've done that for officials across the country. You're not just, these are my people in Montana and these are my people in Arizona, and that's it. You're all about officiating and helping everybody get better. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yep. And Kyle, thank you. I sent you that Yellowstone quote the other day. And I talked about it on an earlier podcast about, he's one of the he's a legend. He's one of the last legends, and nobody's trying to replace him pretty much. And so, I think you are on that list of legends that nobody's trying to replace. But I think the way you go about your business, you make it easy for us to want to try to replace you. So we appreciate that.
And you brought up quote. I'm a quote guy, and I'm always collecting quotes, and
Me
to
too.
tie it up in a bow. Yeah, right. It's great. To tie it up in a bow is just and I'm a movie guy too. So let's do movie and a quote, and I'll sign off, and you guys can talk more if you want. But is the bucket list, with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, and there's a quote in there, and it says, "You measure yourself by the people who measure themselves by you." And that's for me that I'm just like, man, if you can aspire that, and not just in basketball, but in life, just whether it's work, family, siblings, whatever, if that resonated, and it will, I carry that with me a lot.
That's a good one. And that was a great way to tie a bow on it. So Kyle Bacon, thank you so much for your time. And from both Nate and I, thank you for your friendship, your mentorship, your support over the years. We appreciate you and we love you. And we just thank you for taking time with us and sharing your knowledge on our podcast. Much appreciated. And we hope you have a great season, and I'll be looking for you, even though I'm not in the western part of the United States anymore. I have a lot of TV channels that I'll be able to watch it on. So looking forward to see you and wish you all the success and good times in the world.
Much appreciated. Always love getting to hang with you. Nate, sorry. I think you were supposed to talk.
No, it's all right. Hey, that's it. I was just going to close this out. Thanks again for joining us. Check us on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Find episode recaps and previews for upcoming episodes. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook, From A to Zebra Podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.